Welcome to episode 124 of Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and I am so excited to bring to you this week Kyle Maynard. Now, the name should ring a bell. I'm sure you've probably seen him on interviews on television, on viral videos, on social media. But Kyle is one of the epitomes of overcoming obstacles, and we've had many people on this show that have also done the same thing. But Kyle was born without any arms or legs, kind of below the joint, the knee and the elbow, and he found a way to become a football player, found a way to be a successful wrestler, a successful MMA athlete, and then ultimately climbed two of the highest peaks on the planet. So his ability to reverse engineer a situation that he's told he can't do and find a way to do it, and then the mental toughness it took to undertake some of these ventures that he's been on is A, inspirational, but B, just educational, and resets that bar to anyone that's listening. It certainly did for me. So you guys are going to be inspired by this. You're going to enjoy it. He's an incredibly humble human being, and this was so much fun to do. Before we go on, as I always say, please go on to iTunes, rate the show, give me feedback on the show, and then share. The best thing you can do is just help me share this and get these incredible life stories to everyone on the planet, because these people's tales and their journeys that they've been through are truly inspirational. And in a world of negativity, these positive stories, I think, need to be heard. So with that being said, I introduce to you Kyle Maynard. Enjoy. Well, Kyle, firstly, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. I know you've done a few and you've been on all kinds of media outlets, but I know that your journey and some of the things that I've heard you talk about with other people is going to definitely resonate deeply with the people listening to this as well. So thank you, firstly.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you for your community too, for everything that they do.
Yeah, well, they are pretty amazing. I gotta say, I'm enamored by anyone that puts on a uniform. And it's interesting because I heard you talk about that with Tim Ferriss about wanting to serve yourself after 9/11, and I can see how frustrating that must have been.
Yeah, I think a lot of it had roots too in the fact that my dad was military, and I grew up with that mindset. I was born at Walter Reed Army Medical, so the largest hospital where a lot of amputees come back home and do their rehabilitation, and just had it ingrained in me since I was a kid. Basically, he was singing the G-rated Airborne Ranger songs to me, and that mindset, I think, was really important. That the discipline that he got from the military, and then, in turn, was able to help me with as a kid.
Yeah, well, you touched on Walter Reed. That's a great place to start. So I know you were born there. I've had some guests that have been patients there. I've had some guests that work as, on the scientific medical side there. So were you born in Walter Reed just because your parents were based there at the time?
I was, yeah. So my dad was based at Fort Myer, met my mom in DC, and then he got out right after I was born. So we moved from DC to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Spent the first 10 years of my life there, and then Georgia after that. And I've now been in California for the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, whereabouts in California?
In San Diego. I'm looking at the ocean as we speak right now. So through a little cloudy haze, but it could be worse.
Yeah, I used to live in Huntington Beach, so not too far north of you.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's gorgeous there. All right, so then, if you don't mind, I just want to delve into your family unit a little bit. So you had 3 sisters, is that right?
Yeah, 3 sisters, all younger, but they act way more mature.
Yeah, and then, so your dad was a soldier, and what did your mother do again?
So she was a teacher for a bit, and then after I was born and my sisters, then she was a stay-at-home mom.
Okay, that's actually exactly what my mom did too. All right, so then, if you don't mind, we'll talk about the challenges you had physically from birth, and then we'll get away from that after that. But just to set the scene, obviously it's an audio interview. So, your sister's older, you said?
All younger.
Oh,
They
younger.
just act older.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I guess I'm not paying attention
It's
at all
okay.
today. I apologize. So you were the first one then. So when you were born, well, actually, let me rephrase that. When you were pregnant, were there any signs of any physical issues?
Not really. There was one ultrasound where they had trouble measuring my, I think it was like a femur, whatever they used to measure, sort of size and at that point in time. And yeah, so it was the third trimester where there's a little bit of questioning with stuff, but then the doctor came in and was like, oh no, there it is. And then yeah, everything was kind of sound after that until I was born. And to give your audience a little bit more of a visual, basically my arms end at the elbows and legs end at the knees. And so I don't use prosthetics. I use a wheelchair to get around longer distances, but do a lot of bear crawling down on all fours, and don't really use my chair inside the house, mostly because my mom didn't want wheelchair tracks all over the place growing up. But just things are relatively normal. Like I have a stool in my bathroom and kitchen countertop to go and jump up on the counter, but that's about it.
Right. And then what was the name of the amputation?
It's just congenital amputation, and there's really still no known cause really like they've attributed it to. So there's different speculations, but not really anything for certain.
Right, because I've got a firefighter couple friends of mine that had twin girls, and one of the little girls was born, but she did have, I think, the same condition. She was missing one of her hands, so I'm assuming that's the same thing.
Yeah, there's a number of different things that can cause the amputation, or like sort of a limb that has some deformity that congenitally, like at birth, it can be a number of different things, but there's still a lot that we don't know about it. It's fascinating, like how little is actually known about it currently, given the state of like how much we've advanced medically in the last 32 years. But
yeah, absolutely. So kind of fast forwarding a little bit, when you were a little bit older, obviously, yeah, people listening now can think that it would go one of two roads, either down the road of just pity and we're going to have to coddle this young man the rest of his life. But your parents chose the other road, which obviously is the sensible road. So can you explain to me what the philosophy was with your parents on how they decided to address this not as a disability, but just a challenge physically for you to work yourself around?
Yeah, they approached it very from a kind of interesting perspective. I think that the attitude that they chose to take, and one that I've seen has been pretty successful with other parents of kids with disabilities, is really to try to treat me as normal as possible, not to make special accommodations or, really try to even have that too many adaptations or things. Like they tried to encourage me to do most things on my own, or figure out a way that would be, there was a lot of different random household objects. Like still occasionally I'll use a clothes hanger to zip my pants up or something to that effect. So, their attitude was if they treated me normal, then it would become that way, which is interesting that they kind of intuitively knew that when it was just a different time. There wasn't the internet to be able to go and look up and relate to other people that were going through something similar, like your friends, firefighter friends that have kids now. You can go and see, type in the name of a condition and see other people with it and say, wow, okay, like that life could go and work. There was only one guy, I think, locally that they could get in touch with that, to try to schedule a dinner with him. And I think he was a local artist, but I don't know what happened. I think he just didn't show up to the dinner, and that was that. So it was kind of probably for the best that they just chose to try to focus on making things as normal as possible.
Yeah. Now, was there any talk early on of prostheses? I know that you decided not to later in life.
Yeah, there was a lot of attempts and fittings and all of that early on. Some of my earliest memories were driving from Fort Wayne, Indiana, where we lived right after we moved from DC, and we'd go over to Chicago, and I would get my prosthetics fit there at the Shriners Hospital. And, seeing the Sears Tower and all of that those are some of my very earliest memories, the smell of the plaster. So tried it out extensively, but it really never worked too well. I just had a lot more freedom running around the house without them. So decided to throw them away. I think around 5 years old, about a month or so into kindergarten, right after a show and tell class, and the teacher, passed me my toy. All the kids were around me, and I had my prosthetic arms on and prosthetic legs, and I needed help to stand up if I were going to have somebody help pick me up. And I was trying to pull the trigger on the gun to make the sound. I brought a toy machine gun to school for show and tell, which probably wouldn't really fly nowadays. But
No.
then I remember dropping the gun and being super embarrassed, wanting to run out of the room, and I just was stuck there. And teacher passed me the toy again. I still couldn't do it, and there was like hooks on the end of the prosthetic arms. I was trying to get to pull the trigger on the gun, and just couldn't. My mom was watching through a window though, and saw this whole event unfold, and we talked about it the next day, and I kind of wanted to try to convince her to let me come to school without the prosthetics on the next day. And so she agreed to call the teacher, and the teacher I came to school for the second half of the day, and the first half the teacher explained to the class, okay, Kyle had arms and legs yesterday, but he's not going to today, so be prepared for that. And which is pretty interesting concept for 5-year-olds to get their head around, I think. But it was awesome. At the end of the day, they told the teacher that they liked me better like that, and that was the last time I wore them.
Beautiful. Well, that kind of segues well to something I wanted to ask you. We want to talk about bullying, but I want to focus more on the kindness, because we always see, these days the videos of the little shits, picking on someone or whatever, but the ones that go viral are the acts of compassion. So, if you wouldn't mind, just give us an overview of some of the negativity that you had in your school, but then I'd rather focus on the kindness that your classmates showed you as you were in some of these younger years.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too. I always have felt like there's a phenomenon. I didn't come up with this, but I don't know who did actually. But where the attention goes, the energy flows. And if we focus on the bullying and the negative and all that, then we're gonna get more of that. And I was pretty fortunate. I think there was definitely some instances I remember where kids would make fun of me or whatever, and but my mom was really instrumental, I think, in being the one to sort of help socialize and running around the neighborhood and getting other kids to to play street hockey games or whatever else was going on. So that was, just growing up, it was I don't know. I think that large part due to the way that she helped build that community around me, then I never really felt like too out of place until we moved down to Georgia. So that move at 10 years old was rough. Definitely, like, because the kids in Indiana, they looked at me as like, just, oh, that's Kyle. And down in Georgia, it was totally different. So, and that's where playing sports really was the thing that kind of helped pull me out and, saved me from that. Just the transition. I guess the transitions were always the toughest part for anybody that's going through a significant life transition. But I think when you throw in a physical disability in a kid on top of it, then it becomes a little bit that much harder.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had obviously significant challenges. There's no skirting around that when it came to traditionally playing some of these sports. So I know football was your first one that you truly went into. So can you tell me what was that paradigm shift within you and your family that made you say, basically, I'm going to go play football, regardless of whatever cards I've been dealt?
Yeah, it was really, I think a lot of it was the fact that my dad was a football player and I wanted to grow up and be like him. So, I just would dream about that and be in my room. There, I think there was just no lack of imagination too, though, from growing up, right? Like I would sit there and shoot hoops and dream about being in the NBA, or like watch, at that point in time, the Dallas Cowboys were on their crazy run. So, it was like, a Cowboys fan and watching Troy Aikman, throw Hail Marys to Michael Irvin and thinking like, oh man, that's going to be me someday. And, that imagination, I think, is helpful, but it's also too, when you face the reality of a situation, can be, different, distinct from kind of what we paint that picture out to be in our heads. So, playing football, my first tackle was just literally I would take my helmet and smash it into a guy's shins and bring him down. I played in the defensive line, nose guard, right in the middle. They'd be able to go and plug up the hole. And, just my coach told me that I had a 3-foot gap that I had to cause havoc inside. I was playing down on all fours. So the running backs were not looking at me and the floor. They were, looking ahead at the linebackers and the safeties. And basically, it would just, when they got their legs taken out from underneath them, it came as a bit of a surprise. So it was, kind of a, natural thing at first, given the fact that like I was down, like low center of gravity, but going up against bigger kids is obviously a challenge. And as kids got older and bigger, then that became, a lot more challenging, which is why wrestling kind of remained my main sport through middle school and high school. And, later on with jiu-jitsu, when you're competing against somebody, in your weight class, relatively the same size.
Yeah, and what struck me from the video of you, and as you were saying, there you are tackling, and people are tripping over. That's exactly what you want in a takedown. It was just an unorthodox way of doing it versus the traditional route that people take. And that is what's so inspiring about anyone that I've had on the show that's faced challenges, whether it's through injury, whether it's through issues from health or from how they were born, is they just reinvent the wheel. They reverse engineer the way people do it, and they find their own way. And I think that's incredible, and it's a lesson that everyone should be able to learn in this "it's too hard, I can't do it" mentality that we see a lot.
Yeah, no, I think increasingly it's the mindset that surrounds those situations when things don't go well that I'm kind of most fascinated by. What creates the beliefs around someone who's willing just to be able to continue to stand back up time and time again, when things don't go their way. And, that mindset is just, it fascinates me. And it's not so simple and obvious, I think, what creates all of that. Some people seem to do it better than others, but I mean, there's a lot of factors I think that go into conditioning that. And by and large, it probably is a lot of like, there's nature versus nurture. We kind of are who we are in large part, even by the time we're probably 4 or 5 years old. But, there's a lot of plasticity there too, to be able to go and, change your mind and be able to, realize that, okay, something bad happens, but yet there's a hidden advantage here. That's really kind of what it comes down to, is the fact that like within every great disadvantage, I do think that there are inherent advantages in there. It's just choosing to go and look. And it's not even just purely from like a overtly optimistic perspective. It's kind of just looking at things from a highly pragmatic point of view, just to start with the assumption that there is some major advantage here. To make a long story short, like when I started wrestling, I went 0-35, like 0 wins. Took a long time to get that first win. By the time I was a senior in high school, was beating multiple state champions, and ended up being a match away from placing at the senior nationals tournament. So it was at that point a different discussion. It was basically, when I started, it was borderline child abuse that my mom and dad were making me do it. And by the time I was a senior in high school, then it was that I was nearly unfair advantaged over everybody else. But it's not so much even just in the physical, although that is absolutely there. But I think it's in a lot of different situations. If you, I don't know, take a business example, for instance, or something, right? Like the stock market crashes and you're a financial advisor, and you've got all your clients that are running away, and or like everybody's upset. Well, then there's the ones that are able to stay calm and be able to orient themselves towards the advantage, they can understand the fact that there's more money in motion now than has ever been in human history. So if they are positioned appropriately and prepared to be able to go and handle it, they can go out and prospect and build their business such that it'll come back 3, 4, 5 times stronger when the market comes back. So that, it fascinates me, and I mean, your community, I know, is full of those kind of unsung heroes that have had to go and face that reality of really intense adverse situations. I mean, sometimes even, like where your life is at risk, or your friends, and teammates. And, it's the stakes are totally different then, but I think the same principle applies.
Yeah. Yeah. The challenge that they have a lot in our community is the toll that the profession takes on you, especially the hours worked, the shifts, being up all night, the physical toll, the mental toll. And it's great to hear you talk about that, about, just working out how to make it happen, because there is the danger of becoming complacent and losing that drive and saying, oh, well, it can't be fixed. And people like yourself, are obviously, regardless of any physicality at all, but just your mindset is, if I hit a wall, well, let me work out how I can climb that wall, or knock the wall down, or dig under the wall, whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, for sure. But blow it up.
Exactly. But the opportunity is the other side of that wall, and I need to circumnavigate it somehow.
Yeah, and that's that. Really, at the end of the day, too, it's like there's, that's like a really exciting aspect of life. I mean, it sucks sometimes when we're going through it. I don't want to pretend like it doesn't, but being able to deal with those situations and excel at that. Like, I think there has to be a certain level of being excited for when those things come about, and even if only for the opportunity to be able to sort of grow and problem solve and prove to ourselves. I think that, like, as human beings, we are kind of built to do this kind of stuff. Like it's to be able to survive as long as we have, to be able to like build the civilizations that we have. And it's taken an enormous effort of being able to problem solve and constantly come up with different alternative solutions to be able to work something out. It's just, things aren't always so obvious at first, and maybe there are things absolutely that are outside of our control. And sometimes with that alpha mentality, you so desperately want to be able to control stuff and control certain outcomes, but it's not going to always happen. And at that point, a big aspect of this whole principle, I think, is learning to it's stop and accept the circumstances, equanimity, sort of be at peace with whatever's happening around us, tell the truth to ourselves about whatever is occurring, so that way we have a sort of place in the map to be able to start from.
Well, speaking of the wrestling, anyone listening that lost 37 times in a row would be challenged as far as their drive to carry on. My little boy does jiu-jitsu, and he's done it for about 5 years now. And he's built like me, built like a toothpick, so he gets barreled over a lot. But I see that same grit and determination in him, and he sees that loss as a learning opportunity and is never knocked down, even though he's disappointed. So what was your self-talk, and let's say the 37th, fight, getting ready to go into your 38th, that made you, not stop, not say, well, I'm never going to get this, but to carry on and be determined that you were going to get that first win?
Well, it's a good question. Actually, the big difference there, I mean, this is, mind you, I was 11 years old, and like I had yet to learn about being able to, kind of control my mind around a lot of these things. My, dad helped me a tremendous amount with being able to come up with the techniques and the moves. My wrestling coach, Coach Ramos, would, stay after practice, and basically they, would wrestle around on his knees to try to understand, and tuck his elbows into his sleeves, arms in his sleeves, to figure out different moves I could go and use. And so at first, for the first several matches, almost the first year, the main move that I had was to wing a half Nelson. So I'd basically have to have somebody take me down, get behind me, put in a half Nelson pinning combination, and then I would clamp down on it and try to roll the guy. So, kind of already at like a pretty disadvantaged position if the main weapon that I have is to wait for somebody to put in a pinning combination on me and then I can execute. But it, I think the shift was, though, my dad, he kind of played a trick on me, and he said, look, I had not won a single match in the 6th grade, did not really want to come back and do it again. And he wanted to at least encourage me to try. And he said, I didn't win a single match my first year in wrestling either. He said, very few people ever win a match their first year, but everybody who comes back their second season, you're going to beat somebody because you're going to beat somebody who it's their first season. And then, you'll be good. And he kind of embedded this idea in my head. And so consequently, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that, like, when we have like a deeply embedded belief, we're going to go and look and scan solely for evidence to confirm that belief, right? It's confirmation bias, and it can work in our favor too in those instances when you believe that you're going to be successful in something, and then you look for all the reasons why you're going to succeed. And I saw this kid, he's kind of scrawny, and I'm like, oh man, he's his first year wrestler, I heard out, so then I'm just triggered all of these things in my head. Like, he's inexperienced, he's scrawny, he's kind of warming up the wrong way and all this stuff. I don't even remember exactly what he was doing, but we came out and shook hands, and I remember his handshake, and I'm thinking, oh man, he's got a weak handshake. I'm like, this kid's mine. And so I just kind of mauled this first kid that I beat and almost beat him by a tech fall. And, at that point, it was just a very different kind of experience from, the first, 35 or so. It was just like wild to have had that experience and then realize, okay, like, I just destroyed this kid, and like, what, I guess it just completely altered that belief that I was capable. Then all of a sudden I became a lot better, and I believe by the time I was in 8th grade was almost undefeated going into the state tournament. So
all right, now I heard you talking about visualization. I think it was regarding your MMA fights, but was that kind of like the unofficial introduction to that? Did you kind of build on that self-talk and start visualizing yourself beating these people?
Yeah, a lot of this stuff was, I think at that point in time, it was outside of my conscious control. I didn't have anyone that had taught me that aspect of it, right? So I don't remember it being something that we talked about a whole lot until maybe, closer to my senior year. And it's wild how we, as human beings, we spend all day, every day, making internal hallucinations of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, even to some degree, like gustatory or olfactory. Like, it's all of these senses that we have, like, we'll make those inner representations for them, and they kind of like run our life in a lot of ways, but yet they're like barely outside of our conscious awareness. And so doing stuff like visualizing, I mean, it's something that, I talk to a lot of my friends about this stuff, like, and so many people are like, yeah, whatever. Like, there's zero chance you're going to get me to sit down and meditate and visualize something. But I'm like, look, if you understood what this could go and do for you in your life, then you would have a different attitude around it. And it's just sort of the, know thyself, being able to have those deep visualizations and understand, like, what is the framework that makes up your psyche. Like, I just don't understand when people don't have the curiosity to know what makes them them, other than, underlying fear or complacency. I just like, I think there's no limit to wanting to go and understand what makes us, to me at least. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning, but there was still a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety around all this stuff to work towards overcoming.
All right. Now, you mentioned that that initially it was hard to get you in there because they saw you at a disadvantage, and in the end, they said it was unfair that you had an advantage. And it's funny how that perspective shifts when you start winning.
Yeah, nobody complained when I was losing all the time, but when I started beating their kids, and they started to whine a little bit. So yeah, it's just a funny thought. But I mean, that's anything, right? Like there's so many different things where it's like that example throughout history where nobody really cares. It's like, oh yeah, and then you start succeeding and doing something, people are like, oh wait, whoa, hey, what's going on there?
Yeah, exactly. Now, is the modern day, like 2018, with the adaptive world, which I really want to get into a little bit later as well, is there an arena now where they're matching, I don't want to use the word disability, but adaptive athletes based on their absence of limbs in MMA and jiu-jitsu, where you're able to kind of grapple with someone that has the same physicality as yourself?
On a very small scale, it's kind of becoming that. It's a tricky thing though, because the world of quote unquote disabilities, it's so vast, and everybody kind of has something, right? I mean, like there's different things that like might not resemble like a physical disability, but I mean, even like you go inward, and everyone's disabled to some degree, right? So it's really tough though to get a comparison, because it's almost very rarely it's ever going to be like an apples to apples situation. I have a great deal of respect for the Paralympics and the Paralympian athletes, and kind of everything that's occurring inside of that community. However, you look at some of the categories, and there's a lot of different classifications and groupings for things. And, it's challenging to go and put people in those groupings. So when you have so many different groupings, then you're going to have that many different champions at each, event. I see both sides of it. I think there's a lot of like awesome progress, and it's encouraged a lot of other people to compete that maybe wouldn't have otherwise. And that aspect of it, I absolutely love. But it is definitely difficult to get down the classifications and all that stuff. And it just can kind of get watered down, I think, if we do too much of that. Like everybody gets a trophy kind of mentality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And it's funny because I've talked about this on the podcast before. There's that one element where, absolutely right, there's got to be that competition element, and you've got to be able to work towards it. But then there's the other side where it's funny. Most of the people that you hear spouting that rhetoric are, sitting in a lazy boy watching football on TV, doing nothing with their life. So right. To me, the kids that show up in a tournament are doing way more than most of the people that throwing that around in the first place. So I think right. Showing up trophy, not trophy, but the self pride of showing up, regardless of whether you were on the podium or not, is a badge of honor in itself.
Yeah, in the podium too. I remember. So to give you like this example as a thought, I remember in 6th and 7th grade, before I'd even won a match, I'd received several silver and bronze medals, and my mom had hung them on my door. And I don't think I've ever really talked about this publicly. It's interesting, but I always had a little bit of disdain for those medals, and they would actually motivate me to go and work harder, because I felt like they were just completely unearned. The only reason I got those medals is because there weren't enough kids in my weight class. So it wasn't because I had won. It was just purely because there weren't enough kids to field the weight class, and so to field the weight class. So then at that point, I had I got a medal, and I always thought that was just was a cheap way to get a medal. And there was the medals that I had earned later on were ones that I prized a lot.
Yeah,
a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing of it. The medal is a reflection of you becoming the best version of you, and that ends up being a gold. I think that's incredible. But if the best version of you achieves, best in your heart of hearts, that's the peak of your performance. You've done everything you can. That gets you a bronze. Then you need to be fucking proud of that bronze.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Totally.
All right. Well, I want to talk about training as well, because I know we'll get into where you are as far as your CrossFit journey and your lifting journey as well as obviously the climbing. But at what age did your dad start training you? Weights and the fitness side as well as the wrestling.
Started a lot of that when I was a kid. I was 11, 12 years old, and then just gradually, it just started with just a cuff wrapped around my arm and a rope attached to free weights, and that's kind of how it all began. And then just gradually kept kind of progressing and broke my ropes and got chains and broke those chains, got bigger ones, and competed in the GNC's World's Strongest Teen when I was 17, almost 18, and then did sort of a modified bench press, butterfly press of about 120 pounds in each arm, so 240 pounds for 23 reps. And then, but started basically with 2.5 pound, little tiny or 5 pound at most plates on each side, to go and kind of get my form down before my dad would let me move up. So there's a lot of time spent lying on the bench, doing that. And then ultimately, one of my favorite things when I got into the CrossFit was just realizing the deficiencies that I had in all of these different areas that, were not obvious to guys who want to like go to the gym and only work on stuff that they like working on, but then all of a sudden you get, a different type of fitness that kind of picks apart areas where you're not so strong. And, if I could do that modified bench press for 3 or 4 times what I could front squat, then that's not really a balanced athlete. So it just, learning that and focusing on kind of bringing up the deficiencies a bit, they're never going to be our strengths, but we can be less deficient, I think is, it was just completely changed everything. And just the type of training too that CrossFit had inspired. Like I think for forever, I will always do something sort of like that, in the Metcon style. I don't really follow like a strict like CrossFit methodology or anything like that anymore. Just learn from a lot of different people. In fact, Jeff Nichols, who I know is on your podcast, just gave me some phenomenal training advice the last time that we worked out together a couple weeks ago. And it's always a journey. I am forever grateful and to the Greg Glassman and CrossFit founder though for what he brought to the world. And no matter what anybody says, like I opened a CrossFit box in 2008, and I remember the gym world prior to that. We were the 10th gym in Atlanta, and 10th CrossFit box, and it was a different world. It was a completely different space. It was just people were not doing the same things that they're doing now. And no matter what, there's love and hate on both sides, but no one can deny that it has forever changed the landscape of functional fitness in the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I actually got into it right around that same time, when you opened the gym. And I think I've talked about this on the show before, but it was funny. I remember doing handstand push-ups and muscle-ups in the YMCA, and all the high school kids with their cut-off shirts were all like laughing at me. And then about 3 or 4 years later, when CrossFit was cool, the same kids are coming over like, hey, bro, can you show me how to do this? And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, it's not so fucking funny now, is it?
That's awesome.
So, yeah, before it was cool. But it has, and it's stemmed, whatever your thing, whether it's, powerlifting or Olympic lifting or strongman or gymnastics, it's inspired all these, even the combatives that I see on there now, it's definitely spawned that. And if people kind of spin off and then go do, focus on those other areas, and don't technically do CrossFit anymore, if that was something that germinated that interest and then sent it elsewhere, then again, they've done their job. If they question their nutrition, they've done their job.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and that's where it's so cool to see too. And then even, our mutual buddy, Joey DeRolk, see him like in a totally different like type of fitness that's just so creative. But it's fascinating to me how so many things have kind of like, just spawned not necessarily all purely as a consequence of CrossFit. I don't make that like claim by any means, but I think just like in general, like the world of fitness is just erupted in all these different directions. And I mean, there's so many different things now too that like I just generally have no idea what they do, but they're like super successful. Like I've not been in an Orange Theory box, but I mean, those things are freaking blowing up all over the place. There's Fit Wall here in San Diego. There's like, a million different boot camp options and Pilates and yoga. And it just definitely, there's no shortage of stuff to get into in that journey, and I think it's cool to try a lot of different stuff, be able to try stuff that makes us uncomfortable. Yoga is definitely something that I want to incorporate more of into my training regimen. I was actually like literally today thinking this morning having breakfast, and I was like, yeah, I need to start to like stretch to get out of bed this morning. I'm like, okay, it's definitely time to start incorporating a little bit more, maintenance in my routine.
Yeah. Now, how old are you now?
32.
Okay. Yeah. So you're still young, but you're starting to approach that where things will get sore for a couple extra days and things are a little tight.
Yep. Don't take it for granted, all you 20-year-olds listening, but that's as they say, the youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah, very true. I'm trying to stay, keeping up with them, but yeah, it definitely takes a little more work. I can't just roll in with a hangover and then still, crush a wad these days. So we talked about Rolk, and I had him on the show, an amazing human. I'm actually going to California in October and I'm going to train with him when I'm over there. How did you meet him initially?
Man, that's a really good question. I can't remember who the first connection came through. It might have been Henner Gracie. Somehow. Yeah, it's almost kind of like I've just always known him. I don't know if he's one of those people that you meet that's just like they have this infectious spirit that, that aloha spirit is just alive inside of him. So, I'll have to think about that more. You caught me off guard with that one.
Well, what are you thinking about that? So one of the things, obviously, he does a lot of floor work, and he's known for bear crawling ridiculous distances himself. So what, obviously with the crawling work that he does, was he able to put you through things that you'd never kind of done or felt before? Because I saw your face at the end of his workout, which looked very familiar.
Oh yeah, man. He worked me for sure. It was wild. And it, I think like anything, right? When I bear crawl, then I kind of have my own, way of doing it, right? And his way of mixing it up was totally different than anything that I had done. So it he's just a freaking animal too. He's bear crawled 10K distances and I mean all kinds of crazy stuff. So he's an absolute freak of nature, but it's just inspiring being around him. And yeah, he absolutely worked me.
Right. Well, speaking of crawling then, I guess that's a good transition to your introduction to climbing mountains. So as a precursor to that, I actually was very, very lucky to climb the World Trade Center a few months ago with Rob Jones, who lost both legs from an IED explosion. And he used the same kind of prostheses that I see you use sometimes. Took off his legs and put on the pads on his, I think it's just above knee amputation for him. And then bear crawled 103 floors up. So what was it that got you to think about, a vertical, especially such a long vertical challenge like that?
I think it was a lot to do with just adventure ADD. I'd done an MMA fight and was like kind of looking for something else. I'm like, maybe mountaineering. I did a CrossFit competition, and the first workout that we did was a 1,000-meter row on a rowing machine, and then you had to run up Stone Mountain, and knew it probably wasn't gonna fare too well on that. I think the average time was maybe 25 minutes for that event. And I think for me, it was an hour and 47 or something like that. So it was a 900-foot bear crawl up this little granite rock in Atlanta, Georgia. And And then it turned into that night. I came home and told my friend that I wanted to go and climb Kilimanjaro. And she said, "You're effing crazy. Like, you're going to die." Like, she's just perplexed by the fact that I was just completely destroyed by doing so out. And I'm like, already, that crazy sort of imagination of like, all right, let's, 10x this or 20x it. And then a couple of years later, we're just standing on top of the summit. It was a massive process, it's been a long time going into all of that it took to go and get there, but that whole journey was amazing. And it really, I think, was special too, in the fact that, as a kid, I, just grew up, a lot of my time was spent in a wheelchair. And so because of that, my friends would go and run off into the woods and I couldn't go and follow them. And so I wanted to be able to. And that was just proof of the fact that we could, by putting our minds to it and kind of dedicating some time and effort, energy towards it, then, an amazing group of people came together and helped realize that vision. And that was everything. The team that we had to make it happen was absolutely phenomenal. And then a couple of years later, after saying, I'm like, well, I'm probably good on the mountains for a while. And then all of a sudden I find myself on an even higher, colder, longer trip on Mount Aconcagua, which was breathtakingly beautiful and also like breathtaking in every other regard too, including probably the closest I ever came to physical death. And not even kidding. Like, there was a night where I thought that like there was a decent chance when I went to sleep that night that I wouldn't wake up in the morning because of just like sheer exhaustion, and my resting heart rate was not dropping below like 130, 135. So it just, the mountains are just symbolic of so much, but they're, when you actually encounter them, the very literal feeling of it is pretty powerful.
Now, how long, I mean, you said you climbed a mountain, then you talked about another mountain. We missed out the details here. How many hours a day were you climbing, and how many days did it take from the base to the summit?
So Kilimanjaro was 10 days up, I think 2.5 down. It was, I'd say an average day was 5 or 6 hours, maybe 7 or 8, one longer day where we'd have 11 or so hours, 11, almost 12 to go up the Western Breach, which is sort of the steepest Western facing side. It was the most direct path, and it was not our original plan to take that route, but we did, and cut off about 5 days of the total trip time, because I knew I'd rather just have one hellish day to go up this western slope than 5 slow death days of marching around to the east side of the mountain. My arms and my feet were just swelling inside of the gear, and just the mileage that we put on was just incredibly taxing, but it was so beautiful too. And Aconcagua was with that climb, it was different. We had a team of just 4 Americans, including myself, and 2 Argentinian guides. So 6 of us for 17 days. And, almost, I was about 1.5 times, I think, the, amount of time to go up it, and just took everything. So Kilimanjaro is 19,340 feet. Aconcagua is 22,800. And the highest peak in the world outside of the Himalaya. And, on the summit day, there was a body of an American climber that they just brought down. He'd fallen, had a stroke, fell, hit his head, and they just brought his body down like right as we were passing through. And I felt like I was close, knocking on death's door, which is definitely not the place to have something go wrong medically. It was just physically took everything I had inside of me to get it going. And that summit day too just had gear breaking and going through the ice wall and like all this crazy stuff that just it's kind of wild to like sit back and reflect on it from time to time. But that summit was pretty special. You know, we didn't really even tell anybody that we were necessarily going out there to go and do it. I kind of have mixed feelings about, you know, the super social world that we live in. Sometimes I like to just go out and just do stuff and not try to, you know, overtly publicize it. So it it was absolutely awesome. The stars that night that came out too after coming down. Didn't make it back to the camp that I ended up sleeping at until about 1:30 that morning. But that was the toughest physical day of my life, the summit day in Aconcagua, but it was also probably the best too.
Yeah, that must have been pretty challenging if you're questioning your climb and you're telling yourself, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? You know, I'm not going to die. And then they bring a dead climber by you and you're like, okay, maybe I might die. That's got to change your mentality a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a bit different than, than like a first responder too, right? Like if you have somebody who's going into a burning building to go and rescue someone, then there's a different tolerance, I think, for that risk to go and to climb a mountain. It's not as clear as to, that like the purpose for it. And then I come down and get to go and share that story. And then immediately, even though we, like I said, we didn't really intend to go out and do this for the press coverage or whatever, but then that happens. And then all of a sudden people are saying around the world that the story stopped them from suicide. So in a way it's not nearly this like a perfect comparable kind of thing. I do have just a tremendous amount of respect for the, police, fire, military, whoever's going to put on the uniform, put themselves in harm's way. But I guess it was kind of a different way of doing that. It didn't really know or could connect to the amount of hope that it would give people for whatever that was that they were going through. And that was pretty cool.
No, it's very, very cool. And I heard you mention that as what we talked about at the beginning about, having that desire to serve when you saw the towers fall. But then, just like you said, I mean, this was the path that you were supposed to take, and the impact that you've had is paramount to probably anything that you would have been able to done, with a single pair of boots on your feet as a soldier, as a firefighter, as a police officer. And I had the same kind of experience myself. I was never destined to be a soldier, I don't think. And I felt bad about that in one respect. And when I found the fire service, that was my calling. And then now with this podcast as well, it's another way to affect change. And you don't always have to have your hands on people doing that exact profession your entire life to affect change. And you see that through, Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan and some of these other people that are putting these messages out and circumnavigating some of the barriers that we see traditionally. And that's absolutely what I've seen, with you and some of your peers is, regardless of what shape or form it takes, positivity, behavior breeds behavior, and that positivity just grows. And if you can get past the negative barriers, like we talked about social media earlier, and use that for positive reasons, then like you said, you can be climbing a mountain in South America and inspiring a guy in Shanghai. Totally.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. I think that the technology has allowed us to be able to spread this message so much further and faster. And, any message that wants to be spread. I mean, there's, even, ISIS or groups like that will use video to recruit people in social media. It's whatever message we want to go and spread. And ultimately, I think a lot of that messaging comes down to, it's a reflection of us. And, I think it's definitely, like a balance that I've had to have in conversations I've had at, length. One of my best friends that I know of. We talked about him earlier. It was Mitch Aguiar, who's got a big social media presence, and he spends a lot of time and effort and energy in his audience, and even way beyond what people would necessarily like realize. Messaging people, and to me, I'm like, man, that's awesome. That's just it's not my nature. I would rather just be in the world and figure out. Not that. I love receiving messages from people, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I'm like, there's sort of like a blessing and a curse to come with any type of like audience. It's just I feel fortunate to be where I'm at, and also not really sure right now where the future is going to lead, but in a very exciting kind of way. I think it's I'm ready for. I've never really wanted to be associated with like any one thing, was like, wrestler or speaker, author, all this stuff, jiu-jitsu, CrossFit, like, mountaineering. And like, to me, like, that's all well and good, but like, there's a million other different things I want to go and do with the time that I have. So that's a big part of life, is just go out and learn stuff and fail at it at first.
Yeah, you said before, getting comfortable being uncomfortable is the secret of life, in my opinion.
It's a big one for sure.
So I wanted to talk about one more element of your climb before we move on, and then we'll talk about Mitch and Stu and Jeff and the project that you guys have got coming up very soon. But you climbed with a very unique individual. I'm probably going to butcher his name now. Eric Weinmeier.
Yeah.
So please tell us.
Pretty good.
Yeah, tell us. Okay, good. Thank you. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind explaining to the audience, who Eric is, what his physical challenges are, and just briefly what he's done so far.
Yeah. So Eric, he was born with his vision normal and intact. I think it was around 15 years old that he lost it. And it's kind of also around the time I believe that he lost his mother. And so it was just a lot of, challenge, and just a difficulty that he had to be able to endure there, the pain that he transmuted into then, really having a desire to become a climber, and kind of pioneered a lot of the, people with disabilities climbing around the world. So he climbed the 7 summits, which is the high peak on each continent. And on doing so, completed summiting Mount Everest, including Aconcagua and Kilimanjaro, but in particular Everest. It's a huge gap. Aconcagua is the second highest of the 7 summits, but it's 22,800 feet versus Everest is 29,035 feet. So it's a massive difference there. It's definitely, it's not a linear progression either too. As you get higher up in altitude, it just like every little bit sucks as the higher you go. So Eric is just a phenomenal, just force of nature. And he just recently completed kayaking I believe the length of the lower half of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon blind. So it's just wild, the things that he's gotten to go and do and take out of this life. And even more notably, I think, is founding his nonprofit No Barriers, which helps kids and adults with disabilities around the world get to experience, the outdoors and a number of other things. So Eric introduced me to my mountain guide, Kevin Sharilla, who, Kevin and his partner, Kristen, were instrumental to kind of help me get started in the climbing world. And Kevin's been with me on all the major climbs that I've done.
Amazing. Yeah. You see, you talk about people, that's admirable. But then when you put yourself in their place, like for you, for example, perfect example is if I ask the athletes I coach in CrossFit to do, 50-meter bear crawl, they'd be dying at the end of it, and you are doing 7 hours, and so you have to kind of put yourself in the mind. The same with Eric, I can barely find myself from my bed to my bedroom door with the lights off, and to right. Imagine doing that with no vision at all, it's just incredible. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Cross ice ladders and all kinds of crazies, up, ropes and oxygen bottles and tanks. It just is absolutely wild what he achieved there.
Yeah, but both of you, it's here's the deviation from the norm, and both of you are like, all right, well then we'll take this road less traveled then, and we'll still make it work. And that, to me, I mean, it's inspiring because so many excuses are made, and I'm sure you probably have this yourself. I genuinely, compassionately am saddened by people who waste the gift that is the human body because of the fear of getting outside their comfort zone, the fear of, something being hard, whether it's exercise or, nutrition, whatever, and owning that gift.
Yeah, I totally, I feel you. It's just like, it's even like front of mind right now. This morning I went to the DMV and then took a Uber ride back home, and I had a very, very sweet driver, who, though she was just, call it what she is. She was pretty overweight and was, not able to get out of her car to help me, put the wheelchair in, which is fine. Was able to find somebody to help throw the chair in the trunk. And, but she, was in a car accident, as she said, got rear-ended, and in the 90s. And, she said that she can't walk for more than, 2 or 3 minutes at a time without pain. And so then consequently had to live with seemingly a pretty sedentary lifestyle. And, I can empathize with that, and the pain there. I also too, just, always wonder and question. It's like, did she do everything that she could have to get that functionality back? Or was it that she just accepted, some fate that the doctor told her that, oh, you'll never be able to do this again or never be able to do that again? And just, how many stories do we hear about people that have a doctor go and tell them that, and then, they are able to make some type of miraculous turnaround or recovery, right? And just because they decide to and put in that effort. Is that effort without pain? I mean, absolutely not. It's an inextricable part of it, and the suffering that exists there. But I mean, I think invariably results in people that become stronger, and more adapted. Maybe not in the way in which they used to be, but even just, mentally, physically, spiritually, and in just different ways, those alternative ways that we talked about at the beginning. So I always wonder, it's because how many people, I guess, went the other way. How many people heard somebody say that was impossible and they believed them, and then because of that, they had a very different experience of this life. And, who knows why we're here, what we're supposed to do and all of that. Like, I don't pretend to have any of that figured out. Like, I think not knowing actually, empowers me more. Like, not, I have sort of faith in the unknown of something, extraordinary. But like, I also too, I don't know. And then that, it has me question and wonder what that is instead of just assuming. And I guess the best I can come up with is to try your fucking hardest, and if you want to go and do something, then find a way and do it.
Yeah, love that. And I think one of the best representations I've seen of fuck it, I'm going to take control of my life. And I don't know if you ever saw this or not, but there was I forget, he was a paratrooper back in the day, hurt his back, become almost unable to walk, used crutches and was in a wheelchair between the two, became very overweight, and he actually found Diamond Dallas Page's yoga, who's a retired wrestler. Oh yeah, remember that guy?
Yoga, yeah. I've gotten to do his podcast before too. He's an awesome guy.
Oh really? Well he had a specific guy, and it went viral. But this guy filmed himself, almost like time lapse, but over a few weeks at a time, from not being able to walk and just knocking over his bookshelf and all this stuff when he was falling out of these poses, to at the very end he's lost all the weight and he's running through the park, and the doctors told him he'd never be able to walk again. And it was a giant fuck you to what he'd been told. But that's exactly what it takes. Is we know now that diabetes is reversible, heart disease is reversible. I'm pretty sure we're going to discover that cancer is definitely avoidable. with nutrition and exercise, with a lot of them. Obviously, some of the pediatric ones, maybe not so much, but we are just told the wrong things nutritionally. I mean, I was raised being told to, carb up, eat your pasta, eat your bread. And now we know that's horrible advice,
Right.
So it's that ability to question. And I think that, even
it can be delicious advice, but not.
yeah. Oh
not
yeah.
good
Yeah. I
advice.
mean, pasta tastes good, but you can have that if you just, done all the other active stuff first and have your pasta. But, to question things, even politically, we're a country that we just, we look to the blue tie or the red tie, like, oh, lead us, and it's not. You lead yourself, and then you control your own country.
Preach, brother.
I'm getting on my soapbox now. I need to stop.
No, it's great. I think I try to, at this point, to like resist a lot of like different ideologies and try to like just get back to like what is my own truth, and it's amazing, when we've talked about sort of visualization or meditation, like, like just challenge your audience to go and sit and spend, 10 minutes today, just quiet down, take a couple deep breaths and close your eyes and have a conversation with yourself about yourself and your life and like where you could do something different, and like what, how different your life could look if you actually did that. Like what would that look like? Whatever that thing is that comes up and pops up that, we kind of know is there, but then, rarely we do take the time to actually stop and do it. It's amazing. I think that kind of continual process of that peeling away at those layers of excess that we don't need, I think it can result in a kind of transformative experience of this life.
Yeah. Now, do you have a specific meditation practice you do, or is it more just being quiet with your thoughts?
There's not a specific one, I would say. It's a lot of different stuff. I get inspired by different things that I come across, and I just like to throw in and try. Interestingly, Carl Jung right now is kind of like a guy I've been reading a lot about, and he was a psychotherapist in the kind of pre and post World War II in Austria, and kind of revolutionized a lot of what became modern day psychotherapy. And but he just had kind of some intense periods of time of like deep introspection and like visualization and sort of this questioning and beginning to kind of unpack and uncover his psyche, and would paint a lot of the stuff and all kinds of different things like that. So I don't think it has to be anything in particular. Like, again, it's not like any one thing that, if somebody finds something that works for them and it's like a specific program, cool. For me, it's kind of the same thing that's always been. Like, it's just, if it's like the, Bruce Lee philosophy, right? If it works, use it. If not, throw it away.
Yeah, I quote that all the time. I love it. Absorb what is useful.
Yep.
All right. Well, speaking of psychology, I want to hit on one more thing before we transition to talking about the event you got coming up, and then some closing questions. But I heard you mention, I thought this is very interesting because we see that in our community as well. The feeling you had after you had finished your summit and that event was done, and that I'm not even going to paint the picture. What was it like after you had achieved that huge challenge that you gave yourself, that the following weeks and months after that event?
It was a weird time, especially with Aconcagua. Not gonna lie, like after each adventure that I'd done, there was always a period of time afterwards of like a lull of kind of like, oh, okay, now what? And then Aconcagua kind of coming that close to, as close as I felt to like to death. It was really just it did something different in me and changed me. And there was a girl that I was dating before and a little bit after, and she was like, there's just something that was just different kind of about me afterwards. I kind of tend to agree. I think a lot of it was for the better. I think there was almost like a kind of, before I was becoming a lot more nihilistic about the state of the world. and, just sort of like, what's the point? Who am I to do anything different? Like all that kind of stuff that creeps in, right? We just go and look at just the amount of bullshit in the world, and we're like, I don't even want to try. And then somehow after that mountain, it was just like a prayer that I'd made on the fourth night of 17, where I was literally like shaking and shivering in my tent. My heart rate was going crazy that night, like I said. And that was the night that I didn't know like what was going to happen. If I was going to wake up and see the morning. And when I did, I was just like super grateful to continue to exist. And I just prayed that night. I was like, look, if anything is hearing this, then, and can help me get through this, then, I will promise to use my life and to do something with it to help better other people or something, like make this world a better place. And yeah, it was a very profound kind of experience. So then after that, it was just on any big trip, but after that, especially coming back home and kind of going back into normal routine was different. And it's been a very wild journey since that point. Which, there's another whole other podcast discussion and down the road to go into all of that stuff, but it's been a very, let's say, unconventional last couple of years. But I mean, absolutely amazing.
Well, it's interesting, the way you described it, because it sounds like it basically everything was stripped down to, like you said, waking up and being grateful for the very breath in your lungs again, and all the other bullshit was removed.
Totally. It's like there's something I think that happens. I think it happens a lot to people, when you see with the attempted suicides, it happens, with people maybe, especially I'm sure in this community that you have, it's like people that come up with, a close brush with death, it changes you somehow. And, I think maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time, people are left with an intense gratitude just to continue to exist. And, it's kind of, I guess, like not too dissimilar from the, the reports that you hear with people that jump off the San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge and survive, right? And you like continually, routinely say, as soon as they jumped, they knew that was a wrong choice.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to get one of them. Kevin Hines is the guy that is actually touring at the moment, and he's exactly that. He's the guy that was depressed and suicidal, and when he recovered, when he survived that jump, had this epiphany and has been dedicating his life, promoting awareness for mental health and depression and suicide ever since. So that purpose, was given to him. And I think that's what I see in a lot of people that have come out the other side, whether it's addiction or depression, is once you wake up with gratitude and with the desire to help other people, I think that's, that's such a nurturing thing for your soul that empowers you and makes you have that lust for life again.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and there's just so many different ways in which that can occur. But, I think sometimes we just need that spark, that catalyst to realize like, okay, like what's the first step that I need to go and take? And I think that's kind of going back to, asking your folks to go and sit down and reflect for a couple minutes on some of this stuff, like, and then these just thoughts in their life, and like have a conversation with yourself, like, in a calm, reflective state, like, and just see like what is the state of your life and how, what do you want it to be? What steps need to happen to go and make that, make that occur? It's not usually rocket science, and something about, just taking those action steps towards it changes us. So, there's a lot more to unpack, but I think just I think it's to Tecumseh, he was the Iroquois chief, and he said, if you awake in the morning without gratitude, then that fault is on you, effectively. So, like you said, I think just having that place to start, like how fortunate we are to exist, and just what do we need to go and do with that existence to make it an extraordinary one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the hardest thing for people really is to find that quiet, find that space, because, you wake up, you got your TV on at home, and then you get in your car and the radio's on, and, you go have lunch at the restaurant and there's freaking TVs everywhere, and there's just so much white noise that we have. And we're totally in control to shut that down, but it's a challenge to turn off your phone and just find somewhere where you're not going to be disturbed, walk through some woods, whatever it is, and make the time to be alone with your thoughts, whether it's sitting in the lotus position or just walking by the ocean, but somewhere where you're not being bombarded with external stimuli.
No, man, I totally agree. It's I think it becomes even that much more important as the world continues to get noisier. It's even that much more important to go inward and to spend that time. It's kind of it's, if you haven't worked out in a really long time, then it's not the easiest thing in the world to get started and go to the gym. If you're addicted to whatever you are. I mean, for me lately, I've been like on a no caffeine kick, so I'm like, cut it out. But, for the last couple weeks, that craving for the coffee comfort is there, but I know that like I have to do it. So I think it's just it's the exact same thing, but for some reason, especially I notice among males, kind of like 18 to 45, like in that window, for some reason, like sitting down and having that reflective time is like a million times harder than anything else. So I just, it fascinates me when I hear people say like, oh, there's no way I can do that. I'm like, really? You cannot sit still for at least 10 minutes to start. Like, it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
I call complete bullshit.
Absolutely. Well, you think, back not so long ago, every time you walked somewhere, every time you rode a horse somewhere, rode a cart, whatever it was, you weren't, you were alone with your thoughts the whole time. I mean, in my childhood, I'm 44, so pre-Walkman, there was nothing there. And even then, I didn't use it very often because the batteries would last about 27 minutes. But so, you had that, and that's the thing that we have to refine. And I'm quite inspired to see what's going to happen in towns over the next couple of decades, because now we're able to shop online, which I think really was detrimental to humans, the malls and all that consumerism. You get your crap online now. Now those public spaces are starting to be used for bars and coffee shops and these communal spaces where we're interacting with each other. Even if it's not quiet time, we're at least having intelligent conversation again.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I think that like we are social creatures, and I think that that's a big aspect that, I mentioned the Tecumseh, and like I've been learning a lot about the American Indian culture and the social aspects of tribal life, and it like are fascinating. And I think that like we live in a very like disconnected, separate world, and it's almost like the more people that you pack inside of a city, then the more disconnected and separate people feel. It's not the same thing as, like I love what you're saying though too, of like the sort of resurgence of, kind of communal meeting places. And I just wish there's more of like people that would be interested in like just getting together and like talking and thinking about like stuff together, like for not like a direct purpose, but who knows, maybe that'll have to be something I haven't come across. So I would be there, I feel like, with regularity if it existed in any form. But yeah, just in general, like I was thinking about that again today with Uber back from the DMV, and how lucky am I that I can just call an Uber, go to the DMV, get my license renewed. I don't have to bug my sister to go and drop me off before she's, on her way to work or whatever. It's just, we live in just a different world, and what it's going to look like in the future. I'm just super fascinated by, a little bit terrified, but mostly fascinated.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like what we said before, it can be used by so many good things. I think it's up to us to vote with our dollar. If all the shitty elements of technology is rebuked by us, all the crappy, factory farming food and all those elements, and we vote by, growing our own food again and filling communal spaces with intelligent conversation instead of mindlessly protesting, then I think we can change them. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
I love it, man. It's so true.
Right. Well, speaking of change, we're going to transition to something you've got coming up. We're going to put this out immediately because I really want to help you guys with this. But Stu Smith has been on the show, Jeff Nichols has been on the show, and you're working with them and your friend Mitch on a project coming up. So if you wouldn't mind telling us when it is and what it is.
Yeah. So it is. I'll get the exact dates. It's going to be, I believe, the 27th and 28th of August. So right around the corner. And I think there might be a couple spots left, but basically the crew that you mentioned, among others, were coming together to create really the first time that I know of, that I've ever been a part of anything like this, that will just help people prepare for the different selection courses in whether it's fire academy, fire law enforcement, or military. People. There's several people I think coming in that are trying to go to BUDS, and a number of other things right now too. So I think it's going to be a pretty intimate event, but just a massive amount of knowledge. If people aren't aware of who those folks are that you mentioned, then they should definitely Google them. I know most of them through Mitch, who I mentioned has become one of my closest friends and like a brother to me, and just is a fascinating character to be around. And a big element of what we're going to do is like a Bud style beat down for an aspect of it, so people get a little taste of it. But something that he and I have been talking about a lot lately is this concept of conscious suffering, and like sometimes we have to choose to suffer to, end suffering later on, and whether it's in ourselves or the world, right? Like, but there's just going to be so many aspects of it, of just the knowledge and preparation. And I think my piece of it's going to be sharing some of my story, and also just some of like the mindset elements, for people that are preparing for these various selection courses. So if you missed this one, hopefully we're going to, try to fine tune it and make it even better for the next go round, but no guarantees. So if you hear this and you want to make a last minute trip to Virginia Beach, then you can go to smashinfrog.com with no G. So smashinfrog.com. And I believe there's a link on there it'll say seminar, and you can see I think it's the resilience optimization seminar, maybe something else. I think Jeff Nichols is the one that kind of came up with the title. It was pretty clever, and he's just like an absolute wealth of knowledge. Just blew my mind with a lot of just what he's learned. One of the challenges I have with fitness is just being able to vary the movements that I go and do. A lot of them end up being kind of the same thing. He just totally just put things in a different perspective with regards to like attaching from different vests and lever points and all that. So I'm excited to see what everybody brings to the table with this. I've not met Stu yet, but excited to meet him too. And I think it could be the beginning of something pretty cool. hopefully there's, this goes well, and that's something that we can continue to make better on as we go on in the future.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds great, not only for people trying to get into those professions, but like you said, resiliency. So people that are in those, maybe they've been in there for a few years and they feel themselves, deep within their comfort zone again and want to push the envelope a bit. And I tell you, I've met Stu at the conference a couple of times. I've interviewed him twice technically, and Jeff was one of the people that really educated me on when to do the training as a first responder. If we've come off a shift, is not the time to hit a red line workout. And he really opened my mind as to the programming when you choose to do what kind of intensity. So a huge amount of knowledge there, and then obviously Mitch as well. So anyone listening, if you want the links for that, you can also go to this website, which will be for this podcast, jamesgearing.com, and I'll put the hyperlinks on there too.
Yeah, man, it'll be awesome. I think it's a great point too. I'm just excited to attend and, continue to learn, from these minds myself. So I think whether people come to the seminar or not, there's no shortage of opportunities to sharpen the saw, so to speak. Right. So it's like, go and do that. Life will be better.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I always close with some questions, but I just realized I haven't asked you about your book before I ask about other people's books. So, if you just tell us what your book is called and where people can find that, and also the point in your life that you wrote it.
Yeah, sure. The book is ancient, relative to the book world. It's I wrote it when I was 19, so I'm 32 now. So I wrote it when I was 18 and released it when I was 19, and I wrote it in my freshman dorm room at the University of Georgia. But it was just kind of life up to that point, and it's, I think, a really good representation of a lot of just kind of where I was and kind of everything that was built into it to that point. And so the book is No Excuses, and that helped kind of launch a lot of other things, including the speaking and the gym, and getting to travel around the world for all these reckless adventures. And I would say there's definitely need for another one in light of kind of like just recent happenings. And part of it is the life perspective that you gain. I think in your 20s and 30s is a lot different than what you have growing up as a teenager. When I wrote it, was just a wrestler. So now things will be a little different.
Yeah. And have you started writing that yet, or is it still in the fetal stage?
Fairly fetal, but I would say it's like first on its way to second trimester.
Well, I'm looking forward for the bloody show. So
awesome.
All right. So then, other people's books. Is there a book that you love to recommend to people that you've read? Can be about this or something completely different.
Oh man, how much time you got?
Plenty.
Yeah, no, I'm obsessive about this stuff. I've read so much lately. Trying to think of, a great place to start for people that haven't read this would be Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. Highly recommend. I would say probably there's a lot of let's shout this out. It's I think there's a YouTube channel too that, like, for those that are not big readers but are more inclined to YouTube, there's a YouTube channel that I just came across. It's called Academy of Ideas, and breaks down a tremendous amount of philosophers and different thinkers throughout history that just provide a totally just different perspective on things. Highly recommend that. Been big fan of, seeing what the intellectual dark web guys have been putting out lately. The Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, those guys. Been reading a lot of their stuff and listen to it. It's, and I would say for fiction, one of the greatest fiction books that I've learned a lot about through like leadership and awareness was Dune, actually, and the whole Dune series. I'm a big sci-fi fan, so that was pretty awesome one. And
brilliant. Well, what about a movie and or documentary?
Favorite of all time, I would say, would have to be Braveheart. That actually saved my life effectively. My ancestors, my dad's side, were Scottish, and so seeing that, my dad would go and tell me, like, those are our kind of like where we came from, whatever, and like it was just like blew my mind and inspired me. Like if those were ancestors of mine or those type of warriors, then I could have that same spirit inside of me too, and find a way to cultivate that. So it's like, it's always worth a watch. I'd say for documentary, one that's, and this also too is another great book recommendation too. But Sebastian Junger, he wrote a book called Tribe that blew my mind. Another awesome book that I didn't think of too is Empire of the Summer Moon. It tells the history of the Comanche Indian tribes, and they were the dominant military force in North America for over 100 years. So learned a ton from those. Tribe kind of, breaks down like a lot of the issues that we've sort of been talking about lightly today, in terms of, what we see in society and all that, like, and kind of approaches it from a perspective of, this is the ancient wisdom of our ancestors, and kind of, what could be missing in our lives today. And he also did a documentary too, Sebastian Junger. It's called The Rise of ISIS. And that is like bone chilling, but also, it approaches it from, I would say, a fairly pragmatic, just journalistic perspective. And it's just wild to see, and anybody that argues that, good versus evil, a lot of it is a very like relative thing, right? But you go and watch that and you see what Assad and a lot of the horrors and atrocities that were the Syrian people were struck with. It's just absolutely gut-wrenching. So it gives a different perspective too on and just ISIS and its like reason for occurring. So definitely recommend checking those out.
Yeah. Well, I actually had Sebastian on twice now. I read Tribe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. We read Tribe a long time ago, but it pertains so closely. I'm sure some of your military friends have said this. When you are in that group, that tribe, whether it's, a fire station, a crew in a fire station or a military unit, and then you leave that unit, that is definitely, to me, one of the underlying causes of some of the mental health issues that we see, because while they're, literally fighting for their lives, they're happy, they're cohesive because they're with their brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
But then when they're taken from that, whether it's injury or promotion or whatever it is, and you're removed from that unit, you see it over and over and over again, where that loss of that tribe has really detrimental effects to the people.
It's so true. And I think it's, again, coming back to society at large. It's like that is a huge missing, and even if people don't realize that it is, like to an extent that I think we can barely even fathom, and how much better life is when we sort of are a part of something and belong to something, deeply. It changes us. So yeah, that's really cool. Sebastian's been a big hero of mine for a while.
Yeah, no, he was an amazing guy. And the first time we talked more about the book, second time it was about some of his documentaries, and The Rise of ISIS was the most recent one that he did, and it underlines as well how the people of Syria, like you said, are not the terrorists. People of Iraq are not the terrorists. People of Afghanistan, and that these shitbags are embedded amongst people like you and me that are just trying to live their life, and they're being terrorized, and then sadly they're the victims of the opposing force as well sometimes.
So true, man. And it's like they're just people, that are trying to do their best to get by and take care of their families. And then, like you said, you get some tyrannical dictator that comes through that's just a complete, just scourge to humanity that, causes that much like suffering just to, for the greed and power. And it's so wild. And I think, there's a great danger to turning a blind eye to the existence of that type of evil in the world. And doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that, like you said, that everyone there is like guilty of some crime. Like, no, it's like kind of frankly just shitty luck of where like they existed when this person came to power. And yet, like, it's just, even with ISIS too, like they like that area of the world just beat down for so long, and and just finally it's like, okay, we're fed up with that. We're gonna go and do something, and then things just go and swing in the other direction just so rapidly. It's it's crazy. But and I I think that, a bigger answer to all of this stuff is increased connection to people, into the world, to the planet, like to have people give a shit more than they do is the only way I think that like any of this stuff changes, because the tendency that we have towards more like meaningless nihilistic existence, I mean, is like, and there's so many factors that perpetuate that, but like it is, I think the greatest danger that we're facing in the world is just, these tyrants that come up and can emerge, especially inside of a world that it faces like more and more nihilism and self-interest, and just people that are indifferent to that suffering. I can't I can't be aware of it and not care. I just, and I don't by any stretch of the imagination have to, they pretend to have like the answers associated with that. But like, I do know that like, if we don't do something to get people to feel kind of more connected to each other, to the world, to, like literally you go to a place like Manhattan and you get, 8 to 10 million people on a tiny freaking, 2-mile long island. And like, just, it just, but yet there's like this massive separation between people that exists. And I don't feel good about the future of that. And it's not, like with kind of, there's so many of these like bigger problems I think that are on the horizon too, and the swinging and polarities with things. We have to have something that brings us back together, something that binds us to the point where we can see other people as human beings again, outside of just like our closed our closed group and circle. I don't know. There's a lot there that like I've been thinking through a lot, but like clearly I need to work on the articulation of it. But I mean, I can tell you're in the same vein. Like it's, you know, and you're doing what you're doing with your community to try to go and inspire and awaken people to, you know, live a better life and do something. I think that's pretty freaking admirable.
Well, I mean, the same with what you're doing is, I mean, mine's not close to the things that you've done, but it's again shutting off that white noise. You know, we're fed, like you said, the polar opposites in so much of our mainstream media, and it's so easy. You just press the fucking power button and that TV turns off. You know, now you're left with your own thoughts again, and you walk outside your front door, and if everyone does that and helps the people around them, you are going to change the country. And I've made this analogy before, but we got our pyramid upside down here. We all look to that one figurehead in the White House to change our country, and we just need to figure out that we do, and we look around, we help each other and help our community, and choose that kindness and stop arguing about football teams or political affiliations, you know, and we'll fix it. It's as simple as that. And I think there is a paradigm shift about to happen, but it takes people that see that to keep pushing and not give up and not be discouraged, because we're chipping away at that middle group, and the middle group are the ones that you know, you swear you're going to get that 10% that just are lunatics. You know, it's not even worth your effort. But
right, yeah,
you know,
sure.
the middle ones are the ones that are just looking for some direction, and I don't mean that in a patronizing way, but they're the ones that believe the doctor that you can't reverse your diabetes or whatever it is.
Yeah. And
so it takes people just to, you know, gently lead and say, hey, you know, we can do this. You can become whatever you want in life. You can, you know, play football and become a wrestler, even though you have, you know, half your arms and legs, as you know, as you're walking the walk. So it's why I love getting people like you on the show to show everyone to stop making excuses, roll up your sleeves, and just start, you know, making this country great, as the hats like to say. But you've actually got to put the fucking work in to make it happen.
Right, so true. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, and this may be a good place to close on. Like I'm a huge fan of Ralph Waldo Emerson. If anybody's read any of Emerson, you would also too. Another book recommendation would be Mind on Fire. It like absolutely blew my mind. It was a biography of Emerson, but just goes into a lot of you know, his like personal diaries and writings, and can kind of just see a little bit more of what was going on in his psyche. But on that note, Emerson said, "Your actions speak so loudly, I can hardly hear what you say."
Amen to that. Amen to that. Exactly. It's lip service otherwise.
Yep.
All right. Well, I got one more quick question for you before we let you go, if that's okay. Is there a person that you recommend to come on this show to talk to the first responders of the world?
Man, you already had so many of my friends on here. But I've got a few, some of my best friends, you know, in the SEAL teams. But Mitch, you brought up a couple times on here. I think he would be an awesome guest for you. I mean, he's got his own very, you know, unique style, but his just like brutal honesty and authenticity is something I've grown to love a lot. So I think he would be fantastic. And Jeff Gum and Mario Romero, two other really close friends, some of my best friends that Jeff I've known now probably for 4 or 5 years. I'm a partner with him in a swimwear company too that we've launched, Loudmouth Patriot. Mario is getting ready to, you know, he's basically like, he's a former SEAL and now training to be, you know, the 4th Navy SEAL astronaut. And we were just hanging with Chris Connolly, the 2nd SEAL astronaut, as he's prepping for, and that would be another amazing person, I'm sure, too, for you to get a hold of. I don't know if he's doing interviews too much right now, but Chris Connolly was absolutely phenomenal. 2nd SEAL astronaut, and kind of the head of a lot of the, I think his upcoming mission in a year and a half. He's a mission specialist. Will be up in the space station for 6 months. So one of the top astronauts at NASA now. Just, I mean, all around amazing human being. Get to stay at his house for a couple nights and went and did this amazing tour through NASA a couple weeks ago. So awesome. Mario's in that training program. I don't know. I'm really where he was aspiring to be, endeavoring to be. He actually was had a 1.7 GPA in high school, I think, and then ended up taking about 20 remedial math classes and ended up with a degree in theoretical mathematics from Columbia. So just absolute proof that he did it just solely based on the fact that he wanted to break the pattern of this, that no one in his family was good at math. And he did.
Yeah, he smashed it.
So smashed it. It's I feel very, very lucky, very fortunate to be surrounded by so many just amazing human beings, that have kind of done their service but continue to go and serve in their own way now. So yeah,
brilliant.
Happy to provide any introductions, man, and look forward to. I definitely need to go back and listen to some of your episodes too, with some of my buddies here that you've already interviewed, and those episodes with Sebastian too. I think it would be a dream to meet him someday. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I can definitely help connect you guys too. All right. So the very last thing then, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, if they want to invite you to speak with them? What's the best place?
Yeah, it's for invitations to speak. I would say the best way to do it would be my childhood best friend Joey goes and manages my speaking business, and can email Joey at kyle-maynard.com, or you can just go to my website, just kyle-maynard.com, and send an email to us, and also, do the social media thing. Even though I talked trash about it, I'm on there periodically from Instagram and Facebook and all that. Maybe some more stuff in YouTube, or who knows what else in the future. So I'm around. And if you're in San Diego and PB, come say what's up.
Excellent. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. We've been talking for over an hour and a half now. So it's been a fantastic conversation. And, yes, physically, obviously, you got the challenges, the inspiration. But that aside, just what I focus more on is your vision of life, like you said, about gratitude, about getting back to where we're talking to each other and communicating and fixing the world that way. Because I couldn't agree more with that, and that insight through the journey you've come. I hope that this will inspire other people to reach the same conclusion, whatever their personal journey is.
Awesome, man. Thank you, brother. It was fun to talk about some different stuff too, and I think it's a aspect of whatever happens next. I have no idea what entirely that's going to be, but it's going to be interesting to see, to say the least. So thank you.